Welcome back. We hope you had an enjoyable lunch.
For our last panel of the summit, you will hear about how times of crises represent opportunities for companies to reinvent themselves to fight for a better future for people, planet, and profit at the same time. But at this very moment, how are trailblazers making this a reality? How are industry leaders enabling others to do their part in building the carbon-neutral societies of tomorrow? This panel will be moderated by Mr. Pereira, the founder of Retrace Hospitality. And as usual, don't forget to submit any questions you might have before the end of the panel. Mr. Pereira, thank you for being with us today, as well as all our panelists. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me and for the rest of the delegation on this Zoom call, joining from 5 different time zones across 3 different continents this evening. So thank you, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Sustainability is definitely not a new word. In fact, sustainability may have become a word which some of you even blocked your ears off to, given its overuse, misuse, and the pandemic has certainly heightened a focus on sustainability in our industry. Some veterans in our industry have even coined the term sustainability fatigue. But here we are. In the coming hour that we have together, we hope to help you as the future of our industry understand how sustainability does really matter. And it will be up to you to determine then if sustainability truly is the only way forward. Before diving deep in, I would like to allow each of our panelists about 30 seconds to give rapid introductions about themselves, a little bit about their career backgrounds and what brings them to this panel today. Starting all the way from the westernmost hemisphere, Denise Naguib, joining us from Washington, DC. The floor is yours, Denise.
Thank you so much, and good day to everybody. Happy to be with you. So yes, I'm Denise. I lead global sustainability supplier diversity for Marriott International. We are based here just out of the Washington, DC area. I've been with Marriott for 16 years, and before that, I spent a decade doing environmental work for Jean-Michel Cousteau. Happy to be with you and really excited for the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Moving on to Willem Niemeyer, joining us in the opposite time zone all the way in Bangkok, Thailand. Good evening to you, Willem.
Good evening, and good evening to everybody who has dialed in. Very proud to be here, and what a great subject to talk about, and a great panel as well. I'm the founder and the CEO of Yana Ventures, and we are a partner in and an owner in a collection of hospitality, tourism ventures, and also we do travel tech globally. Our ventures, we started about 30 years ago, and our ventures now include destination management company, eco lodges, luxury tented camps, hospitality management, and as I mentioned, travel tech as well. Great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the next hour.
Thank you, Willem. Adrian, joining us from the lovely Swiss Alps. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jelana. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm Adrian. I'm a director investment management at Invesco Real Estate, and I'm also an ESG champion for the European business at Invesco. I'm partially responsible for Invesco Real Estate's hotel portfolio across Europe, which is mainly leased to international brands or to white label operators with an international franchise. I'm an EHL alumni. I have gathered work experience at CBRE Hotels and José LaSalle over the past 13 years, and now with Invesco for 7 years. And I'm currently have the privilege of being on paternity leave. So brings a few topics nicely together, what I'm doing at the moment.
Super, Adrian. We're really glad to have you join us from your paternity leave and from the Swiss Alps. Moving on to our last, but certainly not least, delegate joining us, Susanna Newham from the United Kingdom. Susanna.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here. It's a great panel to be part of and an exciting subject, I think, to be the closing of today's discussions. I am a sustainability consultant with about 17 years working in sustainability and tourism and hospitality, ranging from expeditions through to hotel operations and management to destination management plans. Currently, I'm the senior sustainability advisor at Considerate Group. Considerate Group is a fantastic band of sustainability, data and hospitality consultants. And our remit really is to support those operating, working in hospitality and tourism to become become not just inspiringly, but also measurably more sustainable. We place a great deal of value on data and transparency within the sustainability world. So looking forward to the discussions today.
Thank you, Susanna. Great to have you with us. Denise, as it's your early morning, I'd like to start the conversation with you. You're representing Marriott, and Marriott manages the largest inventory of hotel rooms in the world. What are some of the real challenges that you're faced when implementing sustainability across such a global and vast scale?
Thanks, Shalana. So I think you've said a few of them in there in just the question, right? So scale, we have 8,000 hotels in over 130 countries. So there's a lot of diversity in what that means. Types of hotels, their locations, the laws that are implicated in those particular places. Every one of those creates their own opportunity in terms of what it looks like. But how we really think about it and address it as we think about our efforts is really creating a framework that everybody can look towards and work towards specific goals that are actionable. There may be different ways by which different types of hotels or different sizes and scales of hotels or different locations can work towards those goals. But ultimately, we are one, and we are working together as one towards those goals. And so really making sure that there's enough variety in the way that somebody can get there, that it's not just one linear path of you must do this in order to get there. There are very few things that are really that cut and clean in terms of the way that we deliver our sustainability programming. Data is important. We have to collect it, but there are also lots of different ways that we get the data, right? Some people are automating it. Some people are manually entering it and everything in between. Just even the way that buildings are built, the way that operations happen, every single one of those creates a different way by which we can influence and engage our stakeholders to really move the needle so that it doesn't become this overwhelming thing that we're trying to solve for, 8,000 different ways to do something, but instead have really a true north that we collectively work towards and just have meandering paths to get there sometimes.
Interesting. Thanks for that perspective, Denise. Willem, you're operating on a different scale to Marriott. And interestingly enough, you started in the Southeast Asian region several years ago. You've built a travel business of a diverse portfolio up until now, based out of Bangkok. Have you noticed a shift in the focus on sustainability over time between today, where your businesses stand, and when you first started in the travel industry in that region? Or has sustainability always been a core and central part of what you do?
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good question. We started actually our destination management company, Kiri Travel, was the founding company of our portfolio of companies. It's still going. And when we started out in Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. In particular, that Indochina part was just opening up in the early 90s. That had to do with the lifting of the trade embargo that America had against Vietnam. That was lifted in 1994. This came right after the UN-led elections in Cambodia that ended a very long spell of war and civil war in Cambodia as well. And Laos opened up a little bit earlier with the opening up the friendship bridge that connects Thailand and Laos. And that came kind of after the fall of the Berlin Wall. So this was a very, very different time in which all of these countries were just starting out in their development. So because we were so early on, you could almost say that our small fledgling company at that time was more involved in development work than in the actual for-profit tourism work. So it kind of like was a founding principle of our company to educate and get staff engaged. So, we got our first managers in Cambodia, for example, were motor boys that were just basically running around the town on a motorcycle. And they had the advantage that they spoke some English, and there you go. So it was really kind of development work. So sustainability has always been part of what we do, but in a very natural way. And therefore, over time, it spun when it became more of like, or more fashionable. First of all, I think it was responsible travel became more fashionable, and we were already doing this from the beginning. So times have changed, but our outlook on the triple bottom line has not changed at all. Still very much a part, front and center of what we do.
Excellent. You mentioned a couple of terms there that I'd like to pick up on later, particularly with Susanna on the concept of fashionable terminology in this space. But before getting to Susanna, Adrian, from your perspective, looking at the development and investment angle of this, right, there always needs to be some kind of funding and some kind of institutional support to make anything of scale and of significance. Has sustainability evolved from a nice to have to a more serious must-have for the investment community now?
Well, that's true. I think in my view, it has definitely become a must-have, especially in the sector where I'm working in. At Invesco, we work with institutional money, and for that institutional money, sustainability has definitely become the top criteria. I mean, we see it whatever we do now, sustainability, ESG is top on the agenda. There's no investment committee without an ESG section and an ESG discussion. But maybe we obviously as a team, a hotels team, we've been quite passionate about sustainability for many years, and we've initiated a round table. And I remember it was difficult to gather people to discuss about sustainability. We didn't know, but everyone knew what we all wanted about. And we initially started with getting our technicians on the round table, and exchanging best practices and finding out what are you doing, what are you doing, how are you optimizing, etc. And eventually it led to this three-party talks, because we realize obviously as an investor with leasing our hotels, there's three parties to any building. There's the brand, there's the operator, and there's us. And one can't do anything without the other. And as long as the others are not educated or are not willing to go your way, you need to convince them. And I think over the past 24 months, it has really been a big shift, and we've been able to run into open doors with our sustainability initiatives. And thanks to the help of advisors, we have now tenants who have ESG strategies, which we can talk face-to-face about the same topics. We can create common goals and targets, as Denise pointed out, which are so important. Just be quickly back on what we do. Obviously, over the last month or years, we've now developed our own sustainability strategy at Invesco Real Estate. We're actually breaking it down for each individual fund, because each institutional investor has different targets. For some, it's more social, for some, it's more environmental. And based on that, we then go out and look at investments. And we have a ESG transaction checklist, which we run through on every deal. We have a development checklist, which we run through on every development, ensuring that we only buy and build what is also divestable at the point in time when sustainability has been embraced by everyone. I mean, at the moment, you still find buyers out there who don't care too much about sustainability, but that may change in 5 to 10 years, big time. And then you need to have your asset up to speed. It's not stranded, in order to create value or conserve the value for your investors. And I think that's really what this is all about.
Interesting. Thanks, Adrian. And I think it's nice that you concluded that with buyers that perhaps aren't interested in the space at the moment. Speaking of buyers in hospitality, Susanna, the Considerate Group has advised on a variety of projects for a variety of different clients in this space. Does every hospitality business have a different journey towards sustainability, or are there some crucial common denominators?
Yeah, you're right that we work with a number of different clients, and actually this panel is made up of a good selection of the types of clients that we work with. So Considerate advises at asset fund level with that complexity where, as Adrian said, that you've got the owner, the brand management company and the operators. We work with large hotel groups. So we do work with some Marriott properties, but with a number of large hotel groups. We also work with independent hotel groups. We also work with destination management organizations and small SME hospitality businesses. So I guess the quick answer is no, there's not much similarity between any of the the businesses in terms of who they are and their makeup and their operational practices. But is the journey anyway similar? Sometimes, yes. The journey at the moment is always, we want to do better. If we've been involved, it's because there's an acknowledgement of needing or wanting to do something more in the sustainability field. So the journey is always, we want to improve, we want to be better. And the common denominators that we find when working with clients of all shapes and sizes is, without knowing where you are at the moment, then there is no journey to be had. It's a bit like being lost, I guess. If you want to use a journey as the analogy, then you need to understand where you already are in your map, and then from there, where is it that you want to head to? And then I think Denise said a nice thing earlier, that some of the paths to get there might be different or winding, but it's choosing then which route suits that particular client or particular business style as to how they get from where they are now to their desired future state. And the desired future state isn't always necessarily the same for all companies. If there's a company that's literally had nothing to do with sustainability before and they're just starting out on their journey, their goal might be, we just need to understand what we're already doing. We need to understand what does ESG mean? Do we need to care about social as well as environmental? So the journey might just be, we need in the next 12 months to understand what sustainability is, what the global picture is, and then understand how we fit into that. Other companies that are already far along their journey might say, you know what, we've already got into gear and understand our E and our S and our G, and we're already doing activities. We want to know now how to be innovative. We want to know how to push the boundary of what sustainability can be or is within the hospitality sector. So again, it depends on that starting point of the journey, and it depends on what the aspirational goal is as to where everybody goes. Our common denominator that we place is understanding where you already are and having that set by data and information that you can look at, so that also you can set a future goal and then know how far along your journey you are, looking back at your baseline and saying, okay, in the last 12 months, in the last 5 years, we've achieved, and then being able to celebrate that success. And I would say that's common across everybody, is wanting to know what we've achieved and be able to celebrate it and talk about our successes.
Thank you, Susanna. That's an interesting perspective across different businesses and different clients across your portfolio. If we speak about that diversity or it depending on the context, Denise, within Marriott's large organization and several segments of sub-brands, what does the sustainability journey or the approach to sustainability look like when you look at the luxury or upper end of the market versus some of your limited service or mid-tier product range? Could you perhaps shine some light to the audience on how that varies across your portfolio?
Sure. So we have 30 brands, and those brands, even within themselves, vary. So you could have a brand that has a hotel that has a couple of hundred rooms, and that same brand having, 1,000-room hotel. So there is a lot of variability even within that. And you're right, we have the kind of upper upscale luxury hotels all the way to our select brands, that are pretty consistent in terms of what sort of services being provided through it, and irrelevant of where they are. So there's a lot of potential for variability as we talk about specifically brand standards around them. But interestingly, all of our sustainability brand standards are ubiquitous. They are utilized they're the same brand standards for all of our hotels. And I think part of the reason for that is it's really important as a guest. Guests don't just stay in one brand. They stay in a lot of different brands, and guests that stay at luxury brands some days will stay at select brands other days. And so from a perspective of, the consumer looking in, we want to make sure there's consistency on that. The way that maybe it gets delivered, and I'll give you an example, like our linen reuse program. For all of our hotels, the rule is that if the towels are hung up, they're to be left for the guests and reused. But for the sheets, depending on the brand, the cycle of which those sheets are changed may be different. It may be every third day, maybe twice a week. It might be every other day, depending on the brand. So it's still, there's a path, and it's still the same kind of end goal is to, use less liquids and chemicals to clean the laundry. At the same time, it varies a little bit. But for other things, like as I mentioned, the data is so critical for us. We have a brand standard, or kind of our biggest, most challenging, most value from a points perspective on brand standard audits, is our data collection tool. And that is critical because it really gives us a very important lens into what each of our hotels are doing from both a quantitative and qualitative perspective. It doesn't matter if you're a luxury hotel or a select brand. Customers are looking at you and rating you and evaluating their ability to stay with you based on some pretty standard criteria: carbon footprint, water footprint, sustainable certifications, et cetera. If we do not have that consistent tool in a way by which to collect that information and provide it to our customers, then it'll make it really challenging for us to represent the brands most effectively. That being said, on the kind of outside of the brand standard, which is, for us is sort of the stick, right? There's a lot of programs that you can participate in. The brand standard is one that's going to be audited. But outside of those brand standards, if you think about it, then generally as you go up the chain in terms of complexity of hotel, staffing models, then there are more opportunities to do different kinds of things. So for example, small hotels may not have enough physical footprint to be able to really make meaningful change in terms of a renewable energy project because a roof space is too small. But a large hotel may have a larger roof space, or they may be in a place where they've got land and so they could do more things like composting as part of that. So there does become a little bit of variability as you sort of go beyond sort of what the minimum requirements are and really think about both from a physical asset perspective as well as a labor and staffing model where you just have more people that potentially are specialists. You've got dedicated engineers, you've got people who are in the space who could really do some very different things. You've got executive chefs that are running kitchens as opposed to, smaller food service operations. So with each of those sort of added layers in terms of the size and scale of a hotel, oftentimes you see more opportunities to drive more sustainability through those kinds of models.
Thanks, Denise. Sounds like you're looking at every angle of each business unit to find opportunity for the space to develop in sustainability, and that's an excellent way, I think, particularly for our younger audience that are, looking out at this industry and hearing all this jargon over the past 2 years, and it sounds like there's plenty of opportunity.
Absolutely,
in organization and across organizations, right? Thanks, Adrian. Susanna and you have briefly touched upon three very random but actually very powerful letters. If I allow you to elaborate a bit further, ESG, are we talking about the new CSR, more or less? What's going on there?
Well, I think it is how CSR has just evolved, and it has just grown into ESG, where corporate social responsibility was maybe more focused about the impact of the company on a community, where it is, on the employees, its location, whereas now with ESG, we are looking at the environment. What's the impact of what we do on the environment? How can we reduce the impact we have on the environment by being more energy efficient, reducing the greenhouse gas emissions? I mean, I think the last 24 months, or even if you're looking at since really COP and the big COP and the Paris Agreement, people have become more aware of what's happening around the world. We have deforestation in the Amazons, we've had heat waves in Australia, forest fires, we now have floods in Australia, we've had inequality and social inequality globally, we've had COVID. I think it'll just open up our eyes to all the challenge, the dangers out there, and how global warming is going to make everything even worse. Sea level rising, and we had the Prime Minister standing hip deep in the water, having his speech saying that's what's happening to my island if you continue the path the way we are on greenhouse gas emissions. And I think people have become a lot more aware of that. I think that has made CSR evolve into ESG, and obviously then the E is currently what a lot of people are putting a big focus on. That's where the EU taxonomy comes in, and the targets of net zero carbon, for which a lot of companies or even countries have embraced, be it by 2050 or I think India 2060 or 2070 in other parts of the world, but at least we're all going towards net zero, and that means reducing, becoming more efficient, exchanging our fossil fuel heating plants with greener energies, etc. And I think this is the big story about E. And then S is still as important as ever, because it's about the people on the planet. It's about us. It's about our neighbors, our children. So we have to be looking after them, our own staff. I think it's really important, and I think the young generations, and I do count myself into that generation as well, we value sustainability, and we want to work for someone who has a sustainability agenda and is looking after its staff. I'm on paternity leave, which is a huge thing, as a father, to take 6 months off and to look after the family. So things like that, it's retaining talent, and it's that social part of it, but also socially, it's about what we do about Ukraine at the moment. I mean, we at the company at the moment, we're freeing up hotel space. We've just had 3 families staying at our Sheraton in Krakow, having been refuged out of Ukraine. They were staying us for free in our hotel. That's a partnership with Marriott. We're looking to do more of that in Germany in our hotels. I have my colleagues running around filling canisters with diesel to fill cars to go to Ukraine, pick up people, bring them back to Munich and the area. So that's all the part of social, and I think that's what we really have to take care of, and it's really important. And then the G, that's governance, and that's being integer, having big business integrity, being transparent, complying with ESG laws. I mean, there's lots of countries bringing up laws and regulations. Look at France. You have the décret tertiaire, where everyone has to report on its ESG consumptions or its greenhouse gas emissions, heating use, etc. And that's become law. So you have to follow these laws. That's all part of that. It's the disclosure and reportings. Sustainable financial disclosure regulation, which is for institutional investors, really important. So there's lots of things out there in the governance space which make us having to adhere to that, and which are putting pressure on institutional investors, on any company out there, to be behaving sustainably.
Interesting. Thanks for that, for bringing those down to such concise definitions. I know it's quite difficult to bring those into a nutshell.
And there's lots more.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's that article you recently co-authored on ESG and hotel asset life cycle, which we can always share with the audience at a later moment. Your reference to the social initiatives that your organization is partaking in, given the current conflict and crisis in Ukraine, very, very impressive, and I think a very good example. Willem, if we move over to your part, or let's say our part of the world, we're sitting here in the Asian continent. Could you perhaps give us some examples of your business model and how you've integrated quite a bit of socially conscious activities into the work you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. Basically, like I said before, everything is because we tend to build things grassroots up. We did it with Kili Travel, and we do the same with our eco lodges. So I built my first eco lodge in the late 90s in the south of Laos, very remote areas. And when you start building in those areas, you are going to be reliant on the local populations to help you, first of all, construct. And then the second part will be to, hire, train your staff from the direct vicinity of the lodge what you're building. And we have had this experience before. We then built a lodge in Cambodia, one in the south of Thailand that we still operate, and another lodge in Cambodia, tented camp in Cambodia that we do as well. So the social element and the environmental element is really connected with each other in everything that we do. And that actually bleeds into the destination management company that we do as well. We work for tour operators worldwide, and we see demand for a more sustainable, responsible product has grown over the last, say, 10 years. And people are really interested in being part, so that the guests are being interested to being part of of that journey, in particular for us in Southeast Asia, where when you come from a long haul market, it is really a different culture that you land into. And you immediately become aware that this is really where the front lines are of, you mentioned before, deforestation. Of course, the Amazon is the poster child for that, but in Southeast Asia, deforestation is on a massive scale. So it becomes really interesting for guests, for a growing number of guests, fortunately, to see what can be done on preventing that. And it also becomes really clear on, the offset of, for example, long-haul flights. How does it really work? Where does this offset come from? We struggle with that, by the way. It's not an easy thing. We will like to, and we do so on a little bit smaller scale, offset on our own properties, which we can do because our properties are either in very close proximity to national parks or actually help sustain national parks as well. So we can do that, but there's a lot of questions about all of that. But on the positive thing, what we can see is that our travelers and guests come very close to environmental and social aspects of and how tourism can be a force for good.
That's great. You mentioned offsetting, and I think that's also been a buzzword over the past couple of years, together with the discussions at the COP26 conference, as Adrian mentioned. Susanna, you've got a nice vantage point, sort of a bird's eye view across a portfolio of clients across the industry. Would you say that most hospitality players are now working towards science-based targets, these sort of SBTs or measurable targets to achieve net zero emissions or offsetting, or where is the industry as a whole?
I think it depends which definition for science-based you take. So obviously there is the fantastic organisation SBTI, which is a framework that can be followed. And that refers really to the science-based part of it being that targets are linked to science-based evidence around climate change. So the pathways to 1.5 or 2%, 2 degree increases in temperature. And that's where the science element comes into it. From our perspective, what we are seeing more of is that people are interested in the science or the mathematics or the data and the stats behind generally what they're doing. And that is anything from looking at actually understanding impact on resource consumption. So if we started at X, how much we, and we've changed all of our lighting to LED light bulbs, or we've changed our HVAC heating and cooling systems to be more energy efficient, what impact is that actually having on the kilowatt hours that we're using and ultimately on our carbon footprint? We're also seeing that there's a move towards, because the standard things to measure within climate are always kind of the energy. There's the scopes 1, 2, and 3. I won't go into all of those at the moment, but the first starting point is normally for people to look at their energy consumption, but actually in the broader sense of ES and G, it's not just enough to look at energy anymore. We need to look at water. We need to look at waste. And waste is important because it embodies energy, it embodies water, and it in its production, but also in its disposal as well. So people are looking at how can we actually confidently understand and measure our waste, and actually have a metric that tells us about our waste. But then also on the social side, people have long been supporting local community in some way, but actually what impact is that having, and can that be measured and looked at? So there might be the value, so how much time, resource, funding have we donated, but also people are interested to know, and what impact has that had? So it's the understanding of the why, it's understanding of the what, and it's understanding of the so what. So I think what historically happened is people all kind of had the why, and it might have been, it's just a heartfelt passion. I feel this is the right thing to do. Then people are saying, okay, well, what's the what? So what exactly is it that we're doing, or what exactly is the metric or the science? Okay, so we've got that. And I think we're moving now with a lot of companies into the so what, which is the, okay, so we've done a thing, so what difference has that actually made? And being able to calculate that. So I think there are more and more companies in the hospitality world that are interested in understanding and quantifying their impacts. Is it most? Sadly not.
Interesting. The why, the what, and the so what. Adrian,
oh, yes.
back to you on that. Typically, sustainability was regarded as, a burden, a cost center, and an investment. From your perspective, as an institutional fund, do you see the change and the shift into investors asking those questions, the why, the what, and the so what? Are we focusing more towards sustainability becoming a source of revenue, or is it still very much a source of costs?
Well, in the hotel business, we're really generating revenues through our guests. So is the guest yet willing to pay more for a sustainable room? I'm not sure yet. Maybe the younger generations, yes, they choose a hotel and they might filter if they can. If they can, you cannot yet always filter for a sustainable hotel, or you have to be carefully looking for the booking engine where you can look for that. But you might take a choice to spend your money in a hotel. Hence, I wouldn't say it's a revenue center yet. It's rather there to improve the bottom line. I mean, we see fossil fuels cost prices going through the roof. How to counterbalance that is by producing your own energy on site. Become making your production on site, offsetting more, not using less fossil fuels, and that then has a positive impact. Then obviously always comes down to the question, I said it in the introduction, there's three parties to the table. And as a landlord, you lease out the building. And if I make a big investment into a HVAC or replacing my oil-powered heating with an alternative source, well, who's going to reap the benefit is the tenant. So how do I make sure as an institutional investor that I don't forego all that profit when I've made the big investment? So that's where we are moving into more profit leases. We're going away from the fixed leases to more profit leases so that we can have a bit of fun as well after having made this big investments, and we're sharing the additional EBITDA savings. So I think it's really from just looking at the E perspective, it's definitely it's helping the profit line, it's helping the bottom line. Then it's and I think we said it at the beginning, it's also for employees, for HR, it's really important that sustainability is there because it helps attracting talents, it helps maybe making a difference. I mean, hospitality is still, it's a very difficult environment or a workspace because salaries are very low. So people move for 50 euros more a month from one company to the other. But if salaries are equal and comparable, people might choose a more sustainable company over another because they know they're very well looked after. There are special programs for the employees, etc., additional trainings, and people make that choice to work for someone more sustainable. And so I think it's become really, so I just lost my thought a little bit here, but going in all different directions, but it's definitely making a big difference. And I think we talked about the principle before, the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit. So I think it's not revenues, but it's definitely profits.
Thanks. Denise, is Marriott seeing this on your bottom lines as well? People, planet, and profit, is that something that is commonplace in boardroom conversations or at management meetings or even amongst back of house staff? Where do you stand with this?
Yeah, great question. And just to pick up on Adrian's comment, I think I think of it as it's an enabler for top line revenue. I think the ability for us to drive sustainability and meet the needs of consumers, both business travels, meetings and events, as well as actually individual travelers, has been a differentiator for those hotels that have been able to show that. and therefore driving revenue in a different way to those hotels. So I'll almost see it, while today maybe it's not, there isn't a revenue center. And candidly, I don't think there should be a revenue center that is pure play sustainability. I don't want to have a sustainable hotel and not a sustainable hotel. I want to have all hotels be sustainable. I think that's the end game, is not to have, the haves and have-nots of sustainability, but to fundamentally shift the way we think about sustainability and embed it in the way that we do business, and have it be part of that triple bottom line, and thinking about decisions in that lens of, is it good for the environment? Is it good for the people and the communities? Are we driving, social and equity throughout? And is it good for profitability? I mean, we have to do good and do well at the same time. It is really that three-legged stool model exists for a reason. There's a value to having that balance and not thinking about it of, one benefits and the others fail. And so I think this idea of sustainability has to cost more may or may not be the perspective we should be looking at, but instead, how do we use sustainability to enable the things that we need to, so that it can become more profitable through time? So if a hotel that has a significant reduction in their carbon footprint is winning more business, that's revenue and profit for them and all of the stakeholders around them, right? They don't have to charge a higher room rate to do that. They just have to get more market share. And if that competitiveness is going to drive more hotels to do more things like that, then everybody wins, right? Because we ultimately are driving the efforts holistically across the sector, getting better and better at it. Investors are looking at it. Oh, these buildings can run more efficiently. So thinking about it from the perspective of how do we leverage that front end sustainability effort, and that the hotels are already doing or are built into the way that hotels are built today, to how do we leverage that to drive more of that top line. I absolutely do believe that it also is a differentiator from a talent perspective. We are in a constant battle for talent as a sector, right? To what Adrian said, you don't go into hospitality to make it big and win lots of money in the process. It's really about the love for travel, the love for hospitality. And one of the ways that we can each differentiate how we think about the talent is to show, not just talk, but show the work that we're doing in this space. We hear it all the time from our university recruiting team that this topic is one of the major topics that they are asked about. And if they're asking, they're making a decision on it. We don't have the specific data points to say, hotel talent has, committed to jobs with X versus Y because of their sustainability efforts, but they're asking about it for a reason, right? Young talent are thinking about the values that they bring into the workforce and how those values can be matched by the companies they're going to put their blood, sweat, and tears into. And so we have to be able to showcase that as individual hotels, as companies, corporations, in order to make sure that we do get the best talent and we do drive that engagement with talent, which has a value, right? If you get people who are more engaged, who want to put in more time and effort, who are, dedicated and loyal to the brand, same with guests, right? The more you can showcase to guests the work that is happening in this space, the more they're going to think twice about picking a different brand or a different direction. So I think across the board, as we think about stakeholders, as we think about investors, Adrian spoke to this a bit, but I've never had so many conversations with investors than in the last 2 years, because they are very much looking at sustainability as a decision point. So it's not just about profitability at the bottom line. It's about how are all these different parts of the business, investments, brand loyalty, recruiting and talent, operators, how are they all thinking about, driving this revenue piece, if you will, by leveraging the sustainability, like I mentioned, the enablement of those efforts through sustainability.
Thank you, Denise. I think that's a nice holistic perspective. Willem, are these conversations that you are also having with your staff in this part of the world at the grassroots level, perhaps individuals and talent that might or might not have had the privilege to attend, business schools or hospitality institutions in an international context? Are you discussing triple bottom line or profit for a purpose with the grassroots level employees in your organizations?
The short answer is absolutely we do. We spend a lot of time on training programs. Part of that is we do that internally. And another part, we have universities visit sometimes student visits, interns. All of that helps to connect academics with the local population. So you get an ongoing education going on, and that education actually goes the other way around as well. We see that quite a bit with our guests staying, but also with interns staying, learning a lot from locals and from local customs and what the actual issues are and what some of the issues we think there are not for local communities. So all of that was very, very interesting to hear about straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, when guests are staying in our lodges, or when our tour companies bring people to visit local communities and conservation projects. So yeah, it is. I think it is an ongoing tourism. What we are in, at least, is an ongoing conversation that is highly educational in what we do. And so yeah, we do engage our direct communities that we operate in all of this. Aside from that, I think what is very helpful is to get these frameworks that are now more and more out there, and Considerate is doing one of these things, but there are many others as well. Global Sustainability Travel Council is doing a lot when it comes to this, providing these frameworks. So even if you are a grassroots, smaller organization, you don't have to invent all of this. You can just follow the criteria that's been set out that helps you on that path, and also helps you prevent greenwashing, which is a real issue in any type of tourism or hospitality industry, be it small or be it big. It's very easy to call yourself as sustainable or green, or pointing on one particular thing that you do. But once you have a framework and a structure, you can basically follow that framework. And if you are, it becomes almost addictive, and you get to a certification level and all of that. So that all of that helps, and it helps engaging staff as well.
Thanks, Willem, and thanks for laying out the plethora of options that entrepreneurs or operators or those interested in investing in this space have between professional organizations that are setting out frameworks, creating programs, accreditation and certification schemes. Susanna, it makes me wonder, and perhaps those in our audience of the next generation are wondering as well, are we just talking about paying for accreditations again? Is this, we're talking about architecture used to have LEED and BREEAM and Platinum and all that statuses. There's a variety of options on how people can put a sticker on themselves with regards to anything nowadays, right? So where do we draw the line between marketing sustainability and actually acting out sustainability? How does that come across from your vantage point?
I guess it depends on the reasoning for wanting a certification or a badge on your company. Some people follow particular frameworks because, as Willem was saying, they like the framework and it provides guidance on what to do when, and kind of what targets or aspirations to set within an organization. And that's a great reason for seeking certification. And then some people like a certification because they want the badge and they think that it will appeal to either future employees or to guests. And I think it's looking for the certifications that are the tougher ones, and the ones that are upheld kind of globally as being the ones that should be recognized. But it's also not to belittle those that choose not to go down the certification route, because for smaller organizations, sometimes certification can be quite expensive, as in to actually buy the certification pack and the badge. So there are other organizations who set their own pathways and will very clearly set out their own strategic targets and goals. Something that we support companies with on a day-to-day basis is coming up with what matters to them and then setting out very clear, structured targets against which they can then measure and report themselves. So you can have self-reporting and publish that, and as long as it's kind of driven with some data and with some kind of baseline and honesty within there, then that's helpful. But quite a lot of times people will start there and then they'll go, you know what, we'll get an international certification now because we want validation that others recognize that we're doing something. And then it's just choosing the correct one. As Considerate Recruit, we're a B Corp. And that's one of the, I guess, newer global recognized sustainability standards. And we find that whether that's companies wanting to work with us or when we're recruiting, that quite often people note that we're a B Corp and they respect and trust the B Corp logo, and so therefore know that we are upholding ourselves to the same standards that we are trying to instill within our clients.
Right. So it's about being flexible and adaptable to what works best for you in the context.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it starts with that intention, right, first. So I appreciate the perspective. We are hosting this on behalf of a Swiss-based event, so I'm cognizant of time and want to stick to a bit of time for our audience to open up their questions. I've already got some very exciting questions coming in. Keep them coming to our audience members all around the world. I'm going to start off with a question that I leave it to the four of you. Whoever wants to jump, go ahead and jump right at it. And that's the nice thing about doing this over Zoom. We don't need to be too polite. Offsetting has often been critiqued as paying for a license to pollute. Does this concept essentially revolve around the wealthy paying to pollute with the poor suffering the consequences, which may be particularly true in tourism?
I'm quite happy to answer about nasty offsetting, which is, I guess, yes, it is often critiqued as a license to pollute. However, and the Sustainable Hospitality Alliance are just publishing guidelines on pathways to net zero, but they all follow the greenhouse gas protocol. So that's what we should all be doing. And that says that you mitigate, and the offsetting should only be used to offset what can't possibly be mitigated. So I think if you've got people who are offsetting as sort of a greenwash or as they'll just pay to get rid of a problem, then that isn't really the kind of genuine way forward. And I think probably I'm nodding from panel, probably in that the organisations that are here today would go with mitigate before pay. And when you take it back to the conversation about whether there's a cost, or revenue to be generated from green or sustainability, then in terms of carbon, it's better to mitigate it than to pay for the energy and then to pay to offset it again. So actually it doesn't make financial business sense to focus on offsetting. So yes, it has been critiqued, and yes, there are people that possibly will just pay their way, but actually when business is done properly and fully sustainably, it's about mitigating first and offsetting anything that's left over. And then it's about choosing where and how it's offset. So if like I'm currently based in the UK, should I be offsetting in Southeast Asia where two of you guys are? Probably not. Is it better for me to mitigate my activities with something that's local to where I'm expending the emissions? So it's also looking at how and where the best offsets can be. It's a very complex subject. We'd need a whole other hour.
Yes, we do.
Right. So anybody else wants to chime in on that, on the dilemmas of offsetting and the ethics, let's say, of taking that approach?
I can talk a little bit about it for our because we see it happening. We see forests being destructed, and we see it directly happening on the ground. And then on the other hand, we have quite a lot of long haul guests and tour operators that are very interested in the offset and almost going to demand, or a number of them actually do demand, that we offset. So we measure and we offset travels, but it becomes a really commercial cycle. So it's a really, really important topic that needs to be addressed, I think, in the next coming couple of years, because it's too easy. And I agree with the premise of the question. It is just too easy to say, yep, no, we offset everything. that we do, and it becomes a check mark. And that's really where we should not be heading. So we need to be looking at this very, very critically.
So I'll just add one quick note for those following the framework for science-based target or net zero. There's a limitation. I think it's 5% on the offsetting for a reason. I think to Susanna's very important point, you mitigate first, and then offset is the last possible thing for those incredibly hard to mitigate now issues, right? As opposed to just using it as the carte blanche for doing bad.
Thanks for the perspective. Looking at another question from our audience, there's questions regarding careers and sustainability, but also mixing up of greenwashing. How do perhaps our audience members, the future generation of future leaders of hospitality, filter through all the noise in this space and some of the great employer branding that's happening with regards to sustainability? Perhaps, yeah. Adrian, you can provide us a perspective, then everybody, we go around, Adrian, Denise, Susanna, Willem.
Well, ask for examples. I mean, if you'll speak to my team, we'll be able to show you plenty of examples of how we do it and how we cut through the greenwashing and how we actually want to make impacts, how we measure. And I think that's something Susanna mentioned and before it's so important to measure, to have your targets, measure against the targets, and then you can really show what impact you're having with your initiatives. And I think that's when you're in this recruitment process. I know everyone, it's all about sustainability, being green, a leaf here and there and everything. But when you're then down in the interview process, ask the questions, ask about particular examples. What are you doing? What are the employee benefits? I mean, how are they looking after the employees? Are there additional trainings? What are the opportunities you're given as an employee, or are you just there to work? What are they giving back to you? Not just financially, but also from other points. So I think it's just knowing what you want and asking that question during the recruitment process and being very clear about it.
Willem, would you like to?
Fully agree. Ask questions. Do your own research. Ask questions. That's the primary way where you can find out if it is really true or if it's greenwashing. So I fully agree with Adrian.
And Denise, perhaps you can give us a bit more on how Marriott is looking at recruitment differently or not with regards to sustainability.
Yeah, I think just to address the first part, I think in terms of what can students do as they're thinking about job opportunities, I absolutely agree with my colleagues here in terms of asking the questions, looking at what are they disclosing, right? Public documentation is important, right? Companies don't just, other than marketing materials out there, but in public disclosures, in reports, their ESG reporting, they're going to be really scrutinous in terms of what goes in there. And so thinking about what is in that report, what is the governance that's outlaid on there? How far up through the organization is accountability for ESG, right? Do they have, if they're publicly traded or private, if they have a board, do they have visibility or understanding of the C-suite involved and engaged in efforts around this? Or is this a talked about but not done effort? I think to the point Adrian made, ask the questions because there should be very real examples. And some of those really come through in the written presentations, but also in how people communicate. We have worked with our recruitment team. We try to embed sort of environmental and social efforts. Our platform is called Serve 360. So we've got, a lot of information to share with students. I think one of the most important thing I'll say is people are kind of thinking about the business is it's not just about being in the sustainability department. If we are to succeed as a sector, we cannot just have tiny sustainability departments with really passionate people doing all the work. It has to be part of every single person's job. If you work in finance, if you work in development, if you work in operations, whatever that is, it has to be part of what you want to do in the world that you are part of. And so I think it's really important to not just have this perspective of, I need to be in the sustainability job full stop, but instead, if you really are passionate about hospitality, you can do a lot by doing the things in your respective work. So, it is not, we have, I don't know how many, 600, 700,000 associates around the world. There's no way that, we're going to be able to get all of them into a sustainability department, but the power of having all of them do something, whether they're in housekeeping or food and beverage or regional offices or whatever it may be, is so much more of value holistically. So I think it's about thinking about in the roles that you're looking at, what are the opportunities to drive sustainability through the work that you do every day.
Thank you, Denise. We're cutting short on time. Susanna, any last words from you?
No, completely agreed. I think the way that we see it as consultants, but also for sustainability teams around the world, is that ideally a sustainability team or a sustainability consultant shouldn't be required. So when we come into work in an organization, we always say you'll know that you're doing well when you no longer require our services. It's the same for sustainability teams. There shouldn't necessarily be one. When I was a sustainability manager and I used to go to my appraisal, I'd say, I know I've done well when you basically need to sack me. So actually, exactly what Denise said is that it's doing what you can do and what you're passionate about within all the multi-varied, fabulous roles that there are in the hospitality and tourism industry, and taking what you know about sustainability and what you're passionate about and taking that into whatever role you take on, and then driving it forward, because only collectively, rather than those couple of individuals around the world with sustainability in their title, can we make a difference.
Sounds like passion is the key takeaway from that concluding
yes.
statement. Thank you very much. And to everybody, Willem joining us from Bangkok, Denise from DC, Adrian from the Swiss Alps, and Susanna in Bristol. Thank you very much. Good night, good day to everybody from Colombo, Sri Lanka. Signing off.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for that wonderful panel. Sustainability is something I often strive to think about. I studied it during high school, and I could really feel that you all have a really big passion for it. And I love listening to all your different perspectives on how we can start implementing this more into the industry. So thank you very much.
As the name of the panel suggests, it is indeed our only way forward. And it will not be an easy task, but the hospitality industry will adapt, and we can recover. We hope you enjoyed this panel as much as we did, but now it's time for another break. We'll see you back here in 10 minutes.
Thank you.